Okay, let's get into Critical Role Campaign 3, Episode 18, and I suggest you stick around until the end because we're going to be talking about something a little controversial. The episode starts out with Bell's Hells battling against a tree-like monster with an anglerfish-like fairy lure, and there were many standout moments within this fight. Firstly, we got to see how role-playing ties into Fresh Cut Grass's class. The more he interacts with members of the party, the stronger he can become. And I personally love that piece of design. I think that is such a cool feature for Matt to throw into the class that incentivizes role-playing. I also really liked Imogen's use of the Feywild Shard. I mean, chaos in the hands of Laura Bailey is always great, but now having chaos on command, well, that's even better. And now to note the mechanical design of the combat, I was really excited that Matt pulled out legendary actions for a creature that was not legendary. Like he stated in the episode, there were times in Campaign 2 and Campaign 1 where the party just steamrolled different monsters. And if you want to have a single monster fight, you gotta give it legendary actions. And that goes from, the low levels 1 to 5, to all the way up to level 20. I think it makes for far better and more engaging campaign fights. So I'm glad that Matt Mercer broke out the legendary actions from his DM's toolbox. And honestly, I hope a lot more monsters get this treatment. My one little gripe though is that I wish the legendary actions had more flair to them. They felt like standard actions, which, most legendary actions that are written in the monster manual are written like that. But I think that you can go above and beyond with legendary actions. I always like seeing in a monster stat block as a DM and experiencing it as a player when a monster has a unique legendary action that they can't do regularly on their turn that is unique to the legendary action. One of my favorites is the beating of a dragon's wings, how they beat the wings. Everyone in, I think it's like a 10-foot radius, has the chance to be knocked prone, take bludgeoning damage, and the dragon can fly off. Those are great legendary actions. And while it takes a bit more time and work on the DM's part, I think with a cinematic, narrative-driven story like Critical Role, it would work really well. But let's transition from one of the best mechanical parts of the fight to one of the best role-playing parts of the fight. No. The best role-playing part of the fight. It is when Laudna is eaten and is in the stomach of the creature, and she can't stay up. She's failing her rolls, she has to make a death save, but then picks herself right back up. I suppose this is a great mechanical moment, and it shows just how powerful Laudna can become when she reaches her full potential at later levels. But it was the moment when Marisha talked about Delilah whispering into the back of Laudna's head, telling her that she has so much more to do and that she needs to fight. I mean, what does she have to do? How much is Delilah manipulating Laudna? And what is Laudna's end goal? And you know what? I'd bet the farm that Delilah is having Laudna seek something, some type of power source. And you know what? Anything goes in Campaign 3. What if Laudna is a secret villain? Wouldn't that be heart-wrenching for someone like Ashton to say that Laudna is the happiest of everyone, and then for Laudna to turn around and really be evil? Or maybe Laudna herself isn't evil, but she is being manipulated by evil. I guess I really didn't understand just how close Delilah actually was to Laudna on a day-to-day basis. So this puts Laudna in a whole new perspective to me, because Laudna, quote-unquote, was resurrected when Delilah died. So what if something more sinister happened? And I'm wondering just how much of Laudna there is in there and how much of Delilah there is as well. But eventually the beast is slain by Fresh Cut Grass, cutting the grass, surprisingly enough. And then Bell's Hells continues on to the Heartmoor. But on the way, they run into a group of 5 hunters. There is a goblin, a human with a drum, a Fearbolg, a hairless tabaxi, and a lithe dragonborn named Hutchin. And I think it's pretty obvious who these people are. They are the party that I am assuming Bell's Hells is going to have to compete against in the coming sessions in order to steal whatever they need from the Twilight Mirror Museum. The party generally converses with them before parting and going on to the Heartmoor Hamlet, which they finally arrive at. Matt, when they arrive as well, roleplays this hilarious guard, and I think it highlights one of his best qualities as a DM, which is he's so good at role-playing just the normal person and grounding his campaign role and setting, and it highlights the party's great job at messing with these normal people and re-establishing that this is indeed a fantasy setting with all these weird and wonderful characters. But eventually they have their fill of this guard and decide to go and get room and board and lodging before heading off to the Twilight Mirror Museum. And everyone they've talked to doesn't really like the museum, and it's not hard to see why. The museum is owned by Ivan Hydroga, who is a fanciful noble in a run-down town in the middle of what is essentially a swamp. They are both boisterous and pretentious. And I'll be honest, when the party goes to meet Ivan, not much happens. We get a general sense of his character. Ivan tells them that they'll be given their assignment soon, and then the party just kind of leaves. And they leave to go to the Moonlight Manor, which is the home of Astani, the astronomer that the Loomis twins, who were killed, were last with. And they meet Astani, this half-elven, half-orc, kindly old man. He has a house full of books, which, according to the town guard, is probably a bad idea in these swampy conditions, but books nevertheless, and probably a wealth of knowledge. And then we just kind of end the session there. And this kind of leads to my controversial thoughts, I believe. And I'm not saying that this is the end-all be-all opinion, but this is what I'm generally feeling in this moment. I think Campaign 3 is slowing down. We're getting to, I don't want to say a slog, but definitely a point of slower plot progression. I certainly think that the tight pacing that Matt employed in the first, I would say, 12 to 13 sessions has begun to slip away. Now, that's not to say that there weren't great moments in the session. However, there were large portions of the episode where I was a little bored. Because you have to know what I mean by this. I'm not just looking at a bunch of players playing D&D and say, "Dance, monkeys." In some of my other videos, that is what Critical Role fans thought I was saying. And I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, though, is that I think certain moments dragged on without really having point or meaning behind them. As a DM, I have to ask myself, okay, what's the point of this combat here? What's the point of role-playing a guard, going to the stables, getting a room, meeting Yvonne, and it not really going very far? Yes, we get character, and character is good, but for me, it definitely slowed down the episode and the session. And then, honestly, I like when the episodes are a little bit shorter, because I have a life. It's very hard for me to sit down and go through a full 4 or 5 hour Critical Role session because I just don't have those chunks of time anymore in my life. But 3 hours I can squeeze in. Like, that's possible for me and for many others. And so I was disappointed when I think one of the most interesting parts of the episode, going to Astani and trying to go into their manor, was cut short because we had all of this, I don't know, like putzing about in the earlier half of the episode. And that comes down to pacing, and that is on Matt, that is on the Dungeon Master. But I will say I'm glad that Matt is getting a break this week, because it always feels like he is back, ready, and rejuvenated after these breaks, at least so far in Campaign 3. And it feels like next session we're going to be getting a lot more progression. And I just want to put it out there that I'm not hating Campaign 3 in any way. I'm still loving the campaign. This has just been something I've been feeling in the past few sessions. And I'll be the first to tell you, I loved Critical Role episode 17 a lot. I mean, it was one of my favorite episodes so far. But I also think the traveling portions of Matt's campaign are some of the weakest. And this video is my impressions of Critical Role Campaign 3. They are my first impressions after I've just watched the episode. And so this is my general impression. This was kind of a filler episode. On initial reaction, if I was having a friend sit down and watch through Critical Role Campaign 3, this is the first episode where I might just say, if you're short on time, it might behoove you to just read the recap. Because there were no particularly outstanding moments that I thought really deserved a spotlight. There were basically no moments in this episode that I would go back and watch. It was just fine. It was fine, and there are going to be episodes like that. But what's your opinion? I know that there are some of you out there who probably thought that Critical Role episode 18 was your favorite episode. So tell me about that. Or are you feeling the same thing as me? What's the community's reaction to this? And if you need some more content to tie you over until the next Critical Role episode, please check out this video right here, and thank you for entering the dungeon.